What's up everyone, this is Ben from Ben Tech Computers, back for a quick follow-up on some overclocking performance with the MSI GTX460 HAWK Edition. So stay tuned and we will check it out. Okay, so MSI Afterburner is the first thing I wanted to cover today. And what I wanted to cover were some weird quirks I had with MSI Afterburner. But before I get into that, I want to just give a quick explanation on how voltage affects a graphics card. You might have heard the terms overvolt or undervolt thrown around, on internet forums or whatever. Basically how voltage affects a graphics card, or actually a CPU or a number of different components, but today graphics cards. Voltage affects how stable your card will run, but also how hot your card will run. If you increase the voltage, you will increase the stability of your card because it has more power to work with, but it will also run hotter because there's more power being pushed through it. Sorry if this is a very sort of brief and dirty explanation. The reason this is slightly concerning is that the core voltage, which is going to be actually what's required and how far you can push your core clock, which is going to be the main determining component in how fast this card will run, is capped at 100 millivolts. So the reason this is a little bit concerning is because in all of the pre-release marketing material I saw for this card, or even like right after release, all the screenshots and YouTube clips from big YouTubers and famous sites were all given 200 millivolts to work with. So what this means is that they're going to produce a lot more heat than 100 millivolts if they crank it up all the way, but they will also have a lot more room to overclock with. Now with my 100 millivolts, which is cranked up all the way that MSI will let me have it, so theoretically it should be producing a ton of heat but also be giving me a lot of room to overclock with. In reality, I never saw my temperatures go above 67 or 68 degrees Celsius, which for this card is not at all a worry. With the reference cooler, it gets to about 78 degrees under full load, so 68, you should have considerably more room to work with, even up to 80 or 85 degrees safely. So MSI has decided to limit our overclock by limiting the amount of voltage we can push through the card, even though we could push through a fair bit more safely when we have that extra 15 or 20 degrees to work with, no worries. So what this voltage limit basically means is that they're putting a ceiling over how much you can overclock this card. I couldn't get mine much past 900 megahertz. I got it up to 930 or 934 or something, stable in Furmark, which I'll show you a screenshot of later. But in 3D Mark Vantage, which is the test that I chose to run, I couldn't get above 900 really. I guess it's a little bit more intensive. Anyway, 900 megahertz was as high as it would go. So anyway, 900 megahertz on the core, the maximum voltage, and 2250 on the memory. Remember, on these cards, the shader and the core are linked together, so the shader is not adjustable, so it's going to automatically be 1800, which is double the core. With this voltage cap in place, I was able to rack up a score of 20,058 3D marks. And the whole time, I think my GPU maxed out at about 68 degrees Celsius. So I really had a lot more room to work with, but I couldn't bump the voltage up anymore. So maybe MSI will later release a BIOS update or an update to Afterburner or something that will allow us to crank it up even more, but as it stands now, that was about as far as I could get it. Just so you know, my system is running right now an i5 750, which is a quad-core chip, basically the same as an i7 but without hyper-threading. It's at about 3.8 or so gigahertz. I'll pull up a CPU-Z screenshot later, as well as 8 gigs of DDR3 memory at 1333. Anyway, I'm now going to revert the card back to its default settings, which is 1800 on the memory as opposed to 2250, and 780 on the core as opposed to 900, and I'll run another pass with 3D Mark and I'll see what the improvement is. Alright, so I just finished another run of 3D Mark Vantage with the card at its out-of-the-box settings, and I got 17,396 3D marks. So that's an improvement of about 2,600 3D marks between the out-of-the-box settings and the settings that I was able to achieve. Remember, you might be able to push yours higher if you had a little patience and a little luck. Just to confirm, the settings are 780 megahertz on the core, 1560 on the shader, and 1800 on the memory. So just to wrap this up, would I still recommend this card? Absolutely. Even though there was that glitch with the voltage that, yeah, it bugged me a little bit, you know what? I understand why MSI did it. Most users aren't going to completely understand the concepts that well, and they might end up damaging their card. 900 megahertz is still a pretty huge overclock when you consider the NVIDIA reference is 675. So that's still an overclock of almost, well, that's about 30% overclock, which is pretty huge for free. I would recommend any GTX 460s to anyone, but I would probably pick this one out of the pack. It's only $10 or maybe $15 more depending where you live compared to a lot of the other cards, and the cooling solution alone is worth that. It's a fantastic cooler. The temperatures were very cool the whole time, even with the voltage bumped up. So now what I'm going to do, in case you didn't already know this card is actually sold out of the box already overclocked. That 780 you see, NVIDIA sells this, or recommends that this card is sold at, I believe it's 675. So that's already a pretty huge overclock right out of the box. So I'm going to go ahead and set it down to the reference settings, run another 3D Mark pass, and we'll compare the three. Okay, so here I am on the NVIDIA website. This is their example of a reference GTX 460. As you can see, the core clock is rated at 675 megahertz. So I'm going to go ahead and set mine down to that setting. My mouse is in the way. Go ahead and set mine down to that setting. I'm going to run another pass of 3D Mark, and we'll see where I come out. Okay, so I just finished a 3D Mark Vantage pass with the card running at its reference settings, and I got 15,361. So just to remind you, the reference settings are 675 megahertz on the core and 1800 on the memory. Now remember, the Hawk will not actually come out of the box with these settings. It'll have 780 on the core, which is a pretty considerable upgrade out of the box. This is just to give you a comparison between what the Hawk will produce as opposed to what some of the other manufacturers of GTX 460s will produce, as opposed to what you might be able to achieve with the Hawk or maybe other models. I'm not sure. Remember, the reference was 15,361, the Hawk was about 17,400, and my overclock pushed a little over 20,000. Very few of the manufacturers are still selling these cards at the reference speeds because they overclock so well and so easily, but a few of them are. So just be aware of that. All in all, I would highly recommend the Hawk card to anyone, even if you're not an overclocker. Just as a great card with long life components and an awesome cooler on top for not that much more money. So if you have any questions, shoot me an email, ben@bentechcomputers.com, or you can leave a comment below the video. Please rate, subscribe. Any questions, just leave me a comment or an email. Thanks. Bye.